Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital. In today's video, we're kicking off a little mini series we have dedicated to using Power Apps and Power Automate to do some light data validation. The scenario we have here is we have a simple Power App and we want to restrict the submission of the form on this Power App to just customers that are in our list. Our list in our case is an Excel document that has a list of customer IDs and some data for the customer, and only if that customer ID is valid do we then want to show folks the rest of this form and allow them to submit. This is what it looks like with a positive request, and if somebody submits an invalid customer ID, they see something like this and they cannot submit the request. So the way this is accomplished is data is sent from Power Apps to Power Automate. Power Automate then looks it up in Excel, gets some data from Excel if it exists, and then responds to Power Apps. And so we're going to learn a little bit about how to send data back and forth, what to do with that data once it's back in Power Apps, how to find data within Excel, and then in part 2, we're going to ensure that folks cannot submit duplicate requests. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome into our workspace. Before we delve into our Power Automate flow, which is going to be the focus of this video, I do want to provide a little bit of extra context for this project just so we kind of understand what's working. My hope is to keep the focus on Power Automate for this particular video and not go in so much to how to build a Power App or set up a SharePoint list and things like that. We do have previous videos on those topics if you're interested, but to help us understand kind of how this project works, we're just going to do a quick overview. We have a little Power App here. It has a big form and only one of the fields is visible right now. This is customer ID. When somebody enters in a customer ID, we're going to have a little button here that's going to run a flow for us, which we haven't set up yet, but we will. And what that flow is going to do is it's going to take that customer ID. It's going to come into an Excel document we have hosted here in SharePoint. It's going to look in this table for that customer ID. And if it finds it, then it's going to return to Power Apps some data about the customer. We're going to have it return the customer name and the promotion that they're eligible for. In future videos, we may also add kind of a tracking mechanism to show instead of, maybe this hasn't been claimed yet, we're going to set it true so you can prevent folks from submitting multiple requests for the same customer. But for now, we're just going to focus on checking the customer ID. If it's here, return some data to Power Apps and allow that person to ultimately submit a request, which will go to a SharePoint list. All right, back here in Power Automate, what I like to do first is start building out our flow, and then we're going to go back over to Power Apps, and we are going to ensure that the flow runs when the button is clicked. And so that button right now in our Power App is hidden. It requires that there's a value in that first field, and when that value is provided, then the button appears, and we're going to run our flow and then feed some data back to Power Apps. So let's start by adding our trigger. So when we click Add a Trigger, we're going to have the option to select something from Power Apps. So if you come here and type Power Apps, there is just one trigger at the moment for Power Apps. See more, here it is. When Power Apps calls a flow as the trigger name. And what makes this very powerful is that we can feed information via parameters into Power Automate, run some logic, and then spit data back out to Power Apps. So just like a traditional programming language where you have a function and you feed it some data and it does something with that data and returns a value, we're going to essentially do the same thing here with Power Apps. And so we are going to add a parameter, and this is what we expect to receive from our Power Apps form. If you click Add an Input, you'll have the option to choose kind of data types, if you will, not exactly, but close. And we are going to use just plain text for this one. And this is the name, kind of think of this as a variable name. And so I'm going to call this incoming customer ID. And so you could specify a default value for it here in your flow if you wanted to, but we're actually going to provide a value via Power Apps when we run this flow. We're going to pass it in the customer ID that was captured in the form, and that will get assigned to this variable name here in Power Automate. So that does it for our trigger step. We're just going to send it one piece of information. We want to add another action, and that is going to be to go find that Excel table and look for data in it. So if we click on Excel Online, you will see all of the different action steps associated with Excel. What we want to do is list rows present in a table, and so this is going to be an Excel table. So if we click that and add it to our flow, it's going to ask a couple of different questions. One, what site is this on? We have an Internet Essentials SharePoint site. It's just in the normal document library. And then we're going to go find the specific file, which is called customer promotion info. And then within that file, we just have one table set up at the moment, and it is called the Contoso table. So before we proceed, I do want to pop over here to Excel, and I did notice a couple oddities when I was setting up this project. One, sometimes if you're used to, like me, just creating a quick table in Excel, you might highlight some cells, go up here, give it a name, and it'll kind of get saved to name managers. For whatever reason, Power Automate doesn't like to see tables that way, or it's considered like a different type of table in Excel, so it doesn't pop up in your Power Automate selector. So what I had to do was come in here, highlight all my data, go into Insert, go into Table, give it a format. Of course, I'm going to get an error here because I already have this set up as a table. Insert a table, give it a name, and then of course SharePoint syncs and saves it automatically. But that was the way I had to do it, rather than just highlighting cells and naming it up here. Even though those appeared in my name manager, it wasn't recognized by Power Automate, and so I spent some time trying to figure that out. So again, have your data in here, go into Insert, highlight it all, go into Table, name it, and that should be good to go. All right, so here is our Contoso table, and then back in our flow, that was the table that we had here. So one other thing that we want to do is, not only do we want to look in that table, but we only want to look for specific things in that table. So we don't want the entire table to come back. We want to add a filter query, which will allow us to specify the rows in that table that we care about. So the way that we want to filter this is we want to set up a column name, and then it's going to look through that column for a specific data. And in our case, the column we care about is customer ID, one word. Again, this matches right here. This is the column that we cared about, we want to match with. And then equal is EQ, is how you specify equals here in Power Automate. And then we want to pass it as string. So it's going to need to be wrapped in single quotes. Double quotes actually might work, but single quotes. And the value here is going to be dynamic. And it's going to be the incoming value that we got here in our trigger step. So if we click the lightning bolts, we will see our trigger step, and it only had one value come through. And so we add that in here. We want to filter all of the rows listed in this table and just return the row where the customer ID is equal to the customer ID provided by Power Apps and fed into our trigger step. So now that we have our data, theoretically, we want to check to see if we actually got anything, or if it returned an empty set, in that this customer ID didn't exist in our table. So it's going to be kind of a fork here. Either true, it did get some data, or false, it did not get any data. And so if I look in here for a condition, we are going to grab the condition control, which will allow you to say, hey, did this happen? Yes or no? And then it's going to fork your logic one way or another, because whether or not we find data in this table, we do want to return to Power Apps something. Either yes, this customer was found, please proceed, or no, this customer was not found, you are not able to proceed. So either way, we do want to respond to Power Apps. So to determine which way we go, we want to check if we got anything back from this step. And what this step, I believe, returns is a big array of values. And so it's going to return an array item for each of the rows that it found in our table. Now we're trusting that our data has just one row per customer ID and that somebody's already scrubbed the data. So what we should get back from this step is either 0 or 1. So we want to check the length of this output to see if it is greater than 0. If so, this is going to be true. We're going to go down this branch. If it is not greater than 0, it must be 0, and therefore it's going to be false, and we're going to go down this branch. So in our condition step, we do want to check the length of our output. So the way we can do that now is there's a length function in Power Automate. If you type that, it's going to ask you what do you want to check the length of. And if you come in here to dynamic content, you can see the values from this list rows present in a table step, and we want to check the body value. So I'm going to put my cursor here, click that. We're going to check the length of the output from this step, and I'm going to add that. And we want to say if it is greater than 0, then we want to go true. If it's not greater than 0, we want to go false. I think we're at a good point to hook this up to Power Apps. We're not at the moment returning any data to Power Apps, but what we can do is at least run the flow from Power Apps and then see if it branches the way that we want it to. So we'll go input a valid ID, it should resolve to true. We'll go input an invalid ID and it should resolve to false. And we can at least ensure that we have this part hooked up before we go back and add the response to Power Apps here. All right, here in Power Apps, the first thing we want to do is add our flow to our app. So we go over here on the left, go to more options, click Power Automate, have the chance to create a new flow right here. It pops up a very similar Power Automate experience. We can go build a flow for the first time, or you can add an existing flow by clicking Add Flow here. And Customer Offer Checker was the name of the flow we were just working on. So I'm going to add that here, and now it's part of my app, so I can use it wherever I want to. In our case, it's going to be on a button. I have my button as part of my card, and the way it works is that if this is blank, the button's not going to show. And so I'm just going to add a value here so we can see our button. I'm not going to dive into the Power App side of this project too much. We have some other videos on it, and I'm happy to show a full project build if folks are interested in it. It just end up being like an hour-long video, and I thought that was maybe a little bit too much. So we have our button here, and the way that it's set up now is if you select it, we have a couple variables that are just getting toggled on and off. This is going to show the loading spinner to show when the flow is running. And we have some results that says, hey, this is approved, or hey, this is not approved. So again, I'm not going to delve into that too much, but what we are going to do is add our flow. So what I want to have happen here on my button is when somebody clicks it, I want my little loading spinner, which is captured using this variable, to show up, meaning kind of it's thinking. Then I want to run my flow, and then I want the loading spinner to go away once the flow is done running. And we're also going to show some results here in a second, just kind of in a container. And so after the loading spinner is showing, I want to be running in the background this flow. And so if you just start typing in the name of your flow, which ours is Customer Offer, you'll see it pop up. And then the .run function will actually initiate the running of that flow. And so you're going to get an error here initially because it's saying, hey, we're expecting an argument. And if you will remember, when we had this set up in Power Automate, we had the first step, whoops, right here, ask for a parameter. And so that's what's missing here in our flow. So we want to give it something. And the value that we want to give it is whatever the user inputted here. So data card value 2. And so I'm going to start typing in data card value 2 dot value. And so this is going to be the value of the text provided in this field. We're going to have our flow run, send it that argument. It will then be received by Power Automate, use that to look up our Excel, and then that's how we're going to validate whether or not that customer ID exists in our database, in quotes, if you will. So let's give that a shot. So firstly, we're going to test this with a valid ID. So I'm going to enter that in. I'm going to click Check Customer. You can see that loading spinner pop up really quickly, which means that flow ran really quickly, and there's no response to Power Apps. And so it just ran, considered it done, it's on to the next one. So we'll go check that in a second. But before we do that, I'm going to submit a bad ID. So this is not valid. So if we check this, again, same thing. And let's pop over and see what that actually looks like in Power Automate now. So if you come up here, I'm going to refresh those flows. You will see that they both succeeded, which makes sense. So there's no error in the flow. This one I submitted 24 seconds ago was the valid ID. So if we pop in here, you can see that it ran through here. It checked our Excel doc, and the condition was considered true. If you pop in here, the expression resulted to true, so it would have normally gone to this branch. Granted, we have no actions tied to it. And then if we come back here and look at the most recent run, this is the one that had an invalid ID. So again, it popped in here, everything ran accordingly. This resolved to false, and therefore it would have gone down to this branch. So it is working correctly in that it is identifying whether or not data exists in our table and then making a decision based on that. So now that our condition is set up and working properly, let's pop into our true branch and respond to Power Apps with some information. So if you come in here, click Add an Action, we want to use an action called respond to a Power App or flow. And you'll see it here under Power Apps. You click that. And so this is going to look very similar to our trigger where it has a bunch of parameters set. And so parameters, just like with our trigger, allows us to declare kind of variables, and we can declare their names and then the values that we associate with them. So what I want to send back to Power Apps are 3 variables. I want to send back the customer name, the promotion that that customer is eligible for, and I'm just going to make things simple and provide a Boolean value, which is going to say, is this customer approved? And in our case, yes or true. And then in the false branch, that'll of course be false. So let's set up 3 parameters. Let's start by adding a parameter of type text for the customer name. We'll add values for them in a second. Let's get them all in here. The second one is going to be also of type text, which is a promotion. This is listed in the Excel, the promotion that the customer is eligible for. The last one is going to be of type yes, no, or Boolean. And we're going to say is approved customer. And so this one will just very explicitly tell Power Apps, yes, this customer was found in the database and therefore is okay. And then when you put it in the false section, this will be set to false. So let's go through and add values for these. Let's start with our customer name field. So if we come up here and go to insert expression, we want to grab our customer name field from the output from this step, list rows present in a table. So if we go to dynamic content, we click body/value, this will give us the entire output from that step. What we care about specifically is the customer field. So if you use a question mark, it allows you to kind of drill into this larger object and specify the field you care about. The word customer here aligns exactly with the table header customer. So anytime you're referring to data sets, you want to ensure that these match exactly. So the next step, we're going to do promotion. We want to make sure that's promotion and not promotions with an S or things like that. It wants to be exactly the same name as you have in your table. So back up in Power Automate, we have that set up. One thing that is a little bit tricky here is that the output from this step is actually going to give us an array of values. And that is because this is expecting to output potentially multiple things. And so it's not going to be a simple string, but it's going to be an array of objects. And so in this step, we can't just say, hey, look at this output and go to the customer, because that could be the customer for 5 objects potentially. Now, in our data, we know that we're just going to have one output. But we need to be very explicit for Power Automate. And if we don't want to have Power Automate automatically try to loop through all of our outputs, we want to tell it explicitly, I want the first item in this array. And so there's a first function. And if we wrap everything except for customer in that, it's going to grab the first item in the array from this step, and then from that first item, look for customer. So let's do that and click add. Nice part is here we have this nice expression written, and we're going to do the exact same thing for promotion, except we're going to just look for a different value. So here in promotion, we are going to insert expression, insert the same one, and then instead of customer, we care about promotion. All right, easy enough. And then is approved here needs to return either a true or a false value. And in our case, because this is on the true side of the tree, we want to add true. And that does it for our true condition. So we have the true side done, and now we want to take a look at the false side. So if nothing is found in our table, we need to give Power Apps back some data still. And one thing that is important is that if you are going to respond to a Power App or flow using this action step, and you're going to do it in numerous places. So here we're going to do it in our true branch, and we're also going to do it in our false branch. You need to ensure that you send Power Apps back the same data structure. So the values can be different, but it's going to expect a customer name, a promotion, and is approved customer values. And that way that on the Power App side, when you're managing incoming data, you always at least have the same variables or parameters coming back your way. And it just really helps simplify things. So it will error on you if you responded on the false branch and only gave it maybe the promotion, but there was no customer name or is approved customer parameters. It will see an error that says, hey, this data doesn't quite look right. So the nice part about that is that we can easily just copy and paste this step over. So I just clicked on it, went in here at copy, expand this, go here, right click on the little plus sign, and you can paste an action. And so now we have two of our actions side by side. They are identical, except that here on the false side, instead of is approved customer true, we want to change that to false. It's okay to leave these two as is, because since this will return kind of an empty row, these variables will simply be blank. And it's this variable that Power Apps really cares about to determine if the user can proceed or not. Back over here in Power Apps, here's our button that runs our flow. And at the moment, we don't have a way to capture the data that comes back from Power Automate to Power Apps. So one thing that's very powerful is that you can capture the return value of this flow, whatever sort of data it sends back, inside of a variable. So if you define set, which again declares a global variable, and let's call this flow results, comma, and then the value of that is going to be set to the return value from this flow, you will then get all of the data back, which is the customer name, the promotion, the is approved customer, inside a new variable called flow results. And then we can take a look at what this variable looks like and how we access the data inside of it. Before we run this again and check on the data that's captured here, we do want to refresh our flow. Because we made some changes, specifically the data that's going to come back from Power Automate, we do want to let Power Apps know what to expect. So if you come back here, find your flow, click refresh, it'll go back and kind of resync both what we send from Power Apps and then what is sent back to Power Apps from Power Automate. So I have a valid ID here. So let's run it and then check what the value of flow results looks like. So if I play my app and I check the customer, it's going to run briefly and then it's done. And if I come in here and hover over flow results, you'll see that it's now a record data type. Sometimes it defaults to a Boolean, which just says, hey, has it ran or not? In this case, it is a record type, which has a big object, or is essentially a big object that has data in it. So the customer name here is this particular customer from our Excel. The promotion that they're eligible for is here, and is approved customer is true. And so if we look back in Excel, here is the entry that I grabbed the customer ID for. Here's the customer name and the promotion that they were eligible for. So this captured the right data and sent it back to Power Apps. So it's now stored in this flow results variable. How do we access the data that's actually inside of it? For example, I want to get explicitly the customer name or the promotion or is approved customer. So let's take a look at how to do that now. So the way I have this Power App set up now is when somebody lands on this for the first time, they see the home screen. I have these three local variables set up. So again, update context allows you to specify a local variable, which is just scoped to a particular screen, which is just fine for this use case. I have customer name var, customer promotion var, and customer is approved. And so these two are set to an empty string, and then customer is approved is set to false initially. I'm going to grab these same variables because I want to update them once we get a response from our flow. So I'm going to paste them in here. And instead of an empty string, when we run our flow, I want to then get the customer name from our flow response. So the flow response is captured in this flow results object. And then if I type a period, I can drill into that object and get specific data. So what I care about for my customer name variable is the customer name. I grab that. For a promotion, again, same thing. I care about the promotion. And then instead of false, now I want to either, it might stay false or it could turn to true based on whether or not the customer is actually approved. And so my variable value for customer is approved here in Power Apps is now updated to the data from Power Automate. The real beauty of this is that once you have that data back from Power Automate, you can update some variables on the Power App side and then use those new variable values to dictate the user experience. So the way we have this set up now is that we update our variables here based on results from our flow. And then I have a bunch of different elements in this form that are hidden or visible based on the value, specifically the value of customer is approved. If this customer is approved and this becomes true, then I want to show a lot of fields in the form and allow someone to ultimately submit the form. If it is false, then that customer is not actually eligible, and I don't want somebody to be able to submit a request. So let's play this out briefly. Again, I'm not going to delve too far into the Power Apps side of this. We can, in a future video, if folks are really interested, kind of build this app from scratch on the Power App side. We do have some prior videos that go over kind of building Power Apps and using variables to toggle visibility and things like that. So this is just kind of more as an example to see what a closer to finished app might look like. So here's an invalid ID. So this runs the flow. It returns a false value since this was not an eligible customer. And then it tells the user that. And then if they were to add a valid ID here, it'll run the same flow and come back with a, hey, you're approved, and here's the rest of the form for you to fill out. So now that somebody has an approved customer, they can come in here, fill out the remaining fields, and then submit this to us. I need this promo for my customer. Again, hopefully you have a better business justification than this, but that's it. What we do also kind of behind the scenes is we set the display type for these inputs to view. And so that means that folks won't be able to actually augment them. So this is actually the parent display though. So the card we have set up to be just view. And so that data is pulled in and set using the variable from our flow. And so that way we don't have folks that fill in like their own customer name and maybe misspell things or use weird characters. Same for the promotion. We don't want folks typing in or editing the promotion that's available for the customer. So these fields are just restricted to view based on the data that was extracted from our flow. Then they can fill out the rest of this data and submit something. Takes them to a simple success screen here, and then they can go back and submit another request. And just to put a bow on it, here is our SharePoint list, and it shows the requests that came in for this particular customer. Alrighty folks, that does it for part 1 here in this little mini series aimed at helping you better understand how to use Power Apps and Power Automate to do some light data validation. We use Excel here, and in a lot of very simple use cases, Excel I think is just fine. Sometimes you're just handed a list, maybe from your manager, that says, hey, these are the accounts that are eligible, these are the customers that are eligible, and you want to create just some simple Power App that allows folks to vet whether or not their customer's on a list, and then if so, proceed with some sort of request. Of course, you may end up using Dataverse or a more mature database, and the logic will look kind of similar. Of course, you can do a lot more if you have a very robust database. In part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to augment this a little bit and then maybe add a sister flow that's going to run alongside it. And what it's going to do is prevent folks from being able to submit requests for the same customer. So we're going to use one of our Excel columns, which is a true-false column, to determine whether a request has been submitted for that customer or not. If it has, then we will prevent the person from being able to submit a duplicate request. Again, all this is in the name of making our lives easier and ensuring the requests submitted to the processing team are valid and good to go. So if you want to stick around, we'll see you in part 2. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.